Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Totally Content. And today we have a session with Paul Jacksons from BMG, and I'm super excited about it. We met last year at the Henry Stewart Conference, and we've been in touch ever since. And I'm really curious to hear what you've been on about since then and what
Yeah.
happened.
Hi, Paul, and like Elizabeth, we're very excited for you to be on here and really curious to learn more about BMG and managing music assets. And we'll get into that in a bit more detail. But um, first of all, I mean, can we kick off by maybe, Paul, if you could introduce yourself and a bit about your experience with DAM?
Of course. Well, hello to both of you. Thank you for inviting me. It's my pleasure. So I'm at BMG and I've been there for around 6 years. And BMG is a music company. The historic word is a record company, but we're so much more than that. We're part record label and music publisher, but there's also departments for licensing and sync and production music. So it's a big house full of all different areas. And I'm part of the supply chain department. So I work in asset management. I run a little team, and supply chain is effectively the bridge between an artist or marketing team's concept for a release and getting it into market, whether that's onto digital platforms such as Spotify or iTunes and so forth, or physical releases on vinyl or CDs. So there's lots of assets to handle, and I oversee the handling of the assets and the applications that handle those and feed them out to various pipes to the different partners. And I come from a archives background, so that's where I enter the the place. Really.
I see.
So, yeah.
And was the archives background to do specifically with music, or was it more general?
No, it was music. I worked in the BBC Music Library. So it was it was called
interesting.
the Gramophone Library, which was its historic name. But when I got there, it was mainly CDs, obviously, and even then, that's a long time ago now. But it was a CD and vinyl library. So when programs are being made, they needed some music, whether for background or to feature. So they would dip into the library, see what there was, search on the database, order up the physical product to then play or edit into their program, radio or television. So I looked after the pop music side. We had pop music, jazz, classical, film soundtracks, all different specialists in those areas. So that's where I did that for about 14 years. And then I moved into a smaller company, which was a digital music online service for broadcasters such as the BBC, but others as well, which would provide a platform for people to find digital music to download and then use similarly in their programs.
So I have a question about that. You know the game Hitster, because it's quite popular today in the Netherlands. It's kind of like you ask these pub. It's like a pub quiz that you do at home.
Okay.
And
Right.
It's about music. So which singer did this and which number is by blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
We need to bring you because it's going to be unfair.
There might be some really gaps in my knowledge. I don't know.
You think so?
Could be. I could get caught out.
Another question I have, Paul, because you talk about assets. Are we talking digital assets only, or are we talking physical assets as well? Or is it one or both? Or
Well, now even the physical products are made from digital files.
Digital,
so,
yes.
But because we've acquired historic catalogues from labels and artists, as well as having new material, we have historic material as well. And with those, we also acquire an archive of physical assets. And that's based on how things used to be recorded in the studio. So even though today, mostly recordings are done what's called in the box, in the computer workstation, digital audio workstation in the studio, historically, you had discs and tapes, reel-to-reels, and then film cans and stuff. So we have a lot of that in our physical archive facilities. And where we haven't got something already digitized, we will then go seek out, if we've got those, digitize them, and then create digital assets from that. But knowing where those came from is very important, knowing what what reel it came from, or what the context was of the original source. That can be quite vital. So mainly digital files, but still some physical items to draw on and to utilize. This isn't a library of finished products. This is an archive, asset management system of all the elements that go towards making the finished products. So the finished products will go out to retail stores and so forth. So we've got all the elements that go towards that. So you've got the artwork, you've got the audio parts, and the video files as well, the various versions of that, depending on whether it's going to go onto YouTube or used on like a TikTok or a website campaign, or delivered as an asset itself to the user, the customer, on a platform like iTunes, Spotify, so forth.
How are your users searching for content today? What does your user community look like, and what they're trying to find?
So we have departments that are looking for assets to utilize. So either we are could be releasing an album for the first time digitally, so it may have only ever been released on vinyl or CD before. So you want to get the digital files of those. So if that doesn't already exist in digital format, you would then get maybe the CD or the original tapes, get those digital files, and then want to put that out into the market, onto the digital service providers. If you're wanting to look for unreleased content, so you're doing an expanded version of an album, so it might be an album that's been out several times in the past decades, but there's might be doing a 40th anniversary. And so when you're doing that, you kind of want to have maybe a bonus disc you could do. So you want to find some unreleased recordings or mixes or some live versions. So then you want to, how do you search for those? So we have an asset management system, and even though that holds the digital files of what's already been digitized, I'm also representing the physical archive in there by having a series of like digital index cards, almost in a way, which kind of harks back to what BBC library system was like. So I've started to take bits that I've experienced in my past and brought it into how you can solve certain challenges now. So we try and put as much information as possible into what we have in the physical archive, so the users can search for those. So users that want to find what film assets have we got for this artist, or what have we got related to this album, other than the main tracks that were released on the album, what B-sides, what 12-inch mixes, have we got any outtakes, recording outtakes from the sessions? Do we have any alternative photos that we use, all the work in progress for the artwork? Do we have any of those locked away anywhere? And sure enough, as you dig in, you could find folders of contact sheets of photo sessions, original artwork parts before the final one was settled on, plethora of recordings of different variations and versions of a song. So if you can present that to them so they can easily search on it, and that comes with its own challenges as well, and which that's a rabbit hole I could easily jump into right now, but I'll save it for later.
So what I appreciate is that of course everything is now digitalized and you have your applications for it, but really the methodology goes back to the old school way of handling an archive and handling a library, isn't it?
Yeah.
And taking lessons from back then and apply it into a new code. It's a new approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And those physical assets, those tapes, they're really just carriers of the content. The asset, even if the asset itself, the file isn't yet in our asset management system, it's sitting on a tape or a disk or another hard drive. So they're still assets, they're just in different places. And it's not always logistically possible or always financially possible to get everything digitized, because and all practical, because some of those formats are really hard to digitize. A lot of them are obsolete. So and all, depending on the condition as well and what machines you need to digitize them. They're not all just simply tapes that you can digitize. That some of them need specialist machines that were created for specialist formats, and if there's only a handful of those left in the world, that's quite a challenge to get those done.
I wonder if you could just talk a bit about sort of the metadata schema and how you're managing that.
Yeah, so there's I'd say about 3 different types of metadata that we have. I mean, we acquire the data if we're acquiring a catalog, or those recordings are being set up by external parties, or even within BMG. There's certain data that you have to capture, obviously artist, title, version. But then when it comes to recordings, you have the International Standard Recording Code, the ISRC, which is a unique code attached to a mastered recording. And that is registered with the performing rights organizations. And that sticks with that recording throughout its life. So you can track it and log it and, audit it as well, in particular to generate royalties or track and locate royalties. So that type of metadata is essential for our systems and for our workflows. As you say, Matt, also there's the data that's generated from the file itself, the file type, the duration of the file, the video codec or the color type, if it's an image, or the audio codec, is it an MP3 or a WAV file? Is it a movie file or a MP4 file? So all those things are captured as well. And that's important because to then send those assets to the suppliers, to the platforms, there's a certain spec that we have to adhere to. So it can only take one type of file. So those files that we capture and all that information, we then validate against that. So we know whether that data, we've got all the information that we meet the criteria before we can send it out the door into the world. So then on top of that, we also have data that we just choose to capture, which we feel is important. And I like to, if we digitize tapes, I like to know what format it came from. So I put that in there, where it was created, any other notes that might be useful to people either using it now or in 5-10 years time, long after I might not be around anymore, but I like to leave it behind so people can say, oh, this was done this was done for this reason. Really good example is, when you're looking at recording sessions, if you've got a recording session digitized that you're looking to get all the parts for an album, at the time of the recording, the song titles might be different. They might have working titles, and also the name of the album may not have even been thought of at the time of recording. The band are just going in to record a session. What the tracks are called and what the album's called is further down the line. So if you've got physical tapes, the name of the album won't necessarily be on that physical tape. So if somebody's wanted to search for recording sessions related to that album, where are you going to put that information? So you have to then choose to retrospectively add that data. These are the tapes, but they're related to this album, although it wasn't known at the time. So you kind of have to go a bit back and forth to add on that extra data, which is just useful for searching, really.
Yeah.
That just immediately piques my interest, because that also comes down to governance. I can imagine that when you do a recording, that you set some sort of parameters, that you at least have to mention the name of the artist or the band or the song or the album, or even though it's work in progress. Do you have any governance set up, and how do you move forward from that? Also, when you're registering your assets, how do you ensure that you have at least a minimum set of metadata added to your assets?
Yeah, so there's very kind of strict guidelines we have to follow, and even our system will show something whether it's compliant or not. So it will tell you if it's missing something or it has to adhere to certain things, and that's the same across all music industry. Particularly when catalogs move, it kind of leaves one and comes into another, and you've got metadata schemas, and that there are standards types of data that can adhere to. When it comes to the archive, though, that's something we set ourselves. We just created a kind of our own schema, basically, and it's very flexible. But also, we keep a very tight taxonomy of different formats and different terminologies and things, and that's one thing. But then to share that with people, to educate and inform them, if you want this kind of asset, then you need to use this terminology, and so we try and create glossaries and trying to explain to people who might not be familiar with the historic recording process on how these assets were originally created. So it's a mixture of very strict guidelines that we have to follow, not set by us, ones that we do set and use ourselves, and then ones that we choose to add on there to help people finding assets that they want.
Within your archive, do you use any machine learning or AI?
We're still exploring that landscape. We're still looking into what tools and functionality that can be used for us. So whether it's an external service that we utilize for certain things, or functions that we can have built in within our internal systems or as internal platforms that we can use. There are certain services we've been trialing and using. What I have found, though, with the term AI, because it has become a bit of a buzz, even though it's been around for a long time. Steven Spielberg made a film called AI, didn't he, many decades ago? It's suddenly become more of a buzzword in the last couple of years. It certainly was at the last Henry Stewart conference. But I have found that, and this is just personal, really, that I do find that AI is misused as a term. Something's called AI when it actually isn't.
I'm so happy.
Because
I'm so happy that you're saying that.
There's certain functions or really advanced technology whether it's in video restoration or audio restoration or image, where AI is being used, and we have to be very careful because a lot of people want to know whether AI is being used in generating content.
Yeah.
And I think if it's being misused, when actually, AI hasn't been. Everyone's calling this AI, but it isn't. It's just really advanced filters in this image program. A program like Photoshop has got filters where it looks for the nearest neighbor to clean up things.
Yeah.
Well, that's not AI. That's really good programming. That's really skilled programming that somebody's done. So I think that misuse of it is very difficult. I don't particularly like the term AI, artificial. I mean, the machine learning is learning from itself. So I wish it was called generative intelligence, to differentiate that from what somebody's actually programmed really good filters.
No, you're preaching to the converted here. I think pattern recognition is very different from some of the more sort of creative things you can do with AI, and for lots of reasons you have to sort of be a bit careful about that. There's a lot in the news about AI being used to create music and to create videos, and so that's.
But it was really interesting because last year I was at a symposium and someone actually had a song created by AI, and it was really bad, and the person presenting knew it was really bad, but he was like, oh, this is what AI can do for you nowadays, but it was really bad. So it again comes down to the human being showing the creativity and having tooling to support you, and you can call it whatever you want to, but ultimately it's a human still validating and checking the quality. And what you briefly mentioned as well, Paul, what I find important is knowing the source, trusting the source, that it's not AI generated. Where is it coming from? Can I rely on this? And that is super important as well.
I think it's all about transparency, and if you have used any kind of AI tools or AI functions, as they call it, pointing that out, even if you feel you might not need to point it out today, you may well need to in the future. There might be a reason why certain events or certain things happen where you can't use that if it's been created that way. So you need to then log it now, just in case you're audited later. I think it's all down to purpose as well. What the purpose is. This is a whole big pathway we could go down, but what's the purpose of creating it? Is AI being used to help with something that you otherwise won't be able to do? Is it to replace something? Is it to fool somebody into thinking it's something else? What is the purpose? Who is it to serve exactly? So those are all the big questions that we should have. Not just how clever the technology is, but
No.
What is the purpose of it really? And there are tools. I mean, there's the Chat GPT and all the different AI chat forms. I've utilized those quite often. I've used Excel for many decades, and so I'm forever writing formulas and using tools in there. So and data cleaning, that's covered most of my life, is data cleaning in spreadsheets. So where you can use tools to help tidy up or identify things or split things up, I find that can be really useful. Good ways to utilize that kind of functionality, really.
Yep. No, makes sense. Just moving on, you mentioned Henry Stewart last year, and you're going to be speaking in June, at the end of June, at the Henry Stewart Europe conference in London. I don't know if you could share any snippet of what you're going to be, the topic you'll be talking about.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It'll be my 5th visit to DAM Europe since 2019. Obviously, there was a couple of years where it didn't happen due to the pandemic, but each year there's been a little, not an itch as much as just a thinking, is there something I could chat about here? Because I was forever chatting to people over lunch and in the breaks and things. And then 6 people, including Elizabeth last year, were ushering me to do a talk this year.
Yes, definitely.
So you're one of the people to blame, Elizabeth. So there's 5 of us as well that all separately said, "Are you going to do a talk next year?" And so the more I thought about it, I thought, well, maybe there is something, I could share my story, because that's the one thing I found from these is all the different stories that people have and the different how you can relate so much to, even if it's a completely different industry or area. You can still relate to people, and whether it's via their talks and presentations or just chatting to people in the workshops and the breaks. And as far as I'm aware, there hasn't been anybody from the music industry before doing a presentation. Certainly not all the times I've been there. So I thought, giving an insight into the kind of assets that I have to deal with and have dealt with, to what we've just talked about now. So I was going to just give a talk on that, what, as I'm at BMG now, but in terms of the music industry, what sort of assets did the music industry handle? How, where it's historic assets that have been created and how they can be repurposed, or assets can be created out of historic assets to new assets for new things. How we store those, and what we need to think about, how we archive them, but also how we can present them to users so they can utilize them and repurpose them for the future. Just because I can't think of why these assets might be used now, it doesn't mean somebody will have an idea for them in 5 or 10 years' time. They might be of some use going forward. We don't know what formats are going to come out, what platforms there will be, what other ways to get music to people. So what some of the best practices now, what decisions can you make now, knowing that you don't know where we're going to be in a few years' time. So I was going to give just an example of a band going into a studio and talking about what the process they used to go through and what assets are left behind on physical tapes and reels and so forth, which we now have in our archives. And then how do you search on those? So all that in a 20-minute nutshell is what I'm aiming for.
Fantastic.
Absolutely. And that I find extremely interesting. As you mentioned, you can relate to what people are saying, but the music industry is different and it's also new. What I hear is it's a little bit of library, it's a little bit of archive, it's a little bit of digital, it's a little bit of musea. So looking forward to your session.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
It sounds like it will be a bit of a therapy session as well as an education.
It always is. It's always good. Feels so much better after chatting with people. Going, exactly. Oh, it's not just me.
No. Metadata transformation is a problem everyone has, and yes.
Yeah.
And so with that in mind, we always ask our guests, just in the spirit of therapy, I suppose. If you could change one thing to be totally content with your archive, what would it be?
I hope it's not a cop-out answer, but I always like to change my mindset. I always like to kind of improve on how I approach things. So sometimes you can get so stuck and involved in the weed and the brambles, and really, I like to change how I approach things and just take a step back occasionally and think, right, let's just have a reset here, and then find a new approach. So it's that really, because forever changing. We don't know what's around the corner. We don't know how fast. Well, we know how fast things are going. It's almost too fast to keep up. So I suppose continuing to change and improve my mindset and approach to things is what I do. It's always self-improvement. It's therapy and self-improvement all the way, and that will help help with the work at hand, really. Yeah.
That's a great answer. Yes,
I really like that, because it's very humble and it's very noble at the same time. So, wow.
Well,
So thank you, Paul. That was really great. And unfortunately, that is all we have time for today. But I'm really looking forward to your talk at Henry Stewart, and let's do some catching up then.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thanks both.